First of all, welcome to new guests and friends as well, because I think it's very important that UPF recognises that there is a lot of values that they can actually help with in all areas of, whether it be religion, organisations, globally. And as Robin was saying, yes, it's 59 years that I've been a journalist. And I can honestly say I've enjoyed every single day of my working life. I've been privileged and honoured with so many incredible times. Even coming here tonight, I feel for me is an honour and a privilege to actually talk to you all and give my commentary on the subject tonight, which is media bias. And I thought, when I read that, I thought, oh goodness, how on earth, what do I talk about? I think that the reality, because I've had a broad spectrum of being a broadcaster over those years, I've been a royal commentator now for over 15 years. I feel like I've saved the royal family more times than I can ever possibly imagine with some of the things that they do these days. I've also worked in politics, and I worked behind the scenes at Number 10 for a while, advising John Major's government on the types of policies that they were looking at. And I think, and I've also been an investigative journalist as well, so I think it gives me an insight into how do you challenge and change messaging, because that's really the key. How do you challenge and change the messaging that is coming out across the world? Now, for me, the world has changed totally, as you can imagine, in 59 years, because when I first started in journalism, I was a photographer. I was a trainee photographer in a local newspaper in Kent. And in those days, if you remember, some of you may remember the old black and white gangster movies where they had the very big cameras, and the big flash guns. That's what we trained on. And in those days, I was like a whippet, that they would send me out on a Saturday afternoon to cover different events. And I swear to God, it was there wasn't an ounce of flesh on me at all. They were the most heaviest things to run around, and I did them on the bus as well. So it was quite a time. But as we moved on in life, and I went from a regional newspaper to national newspapers, and when I first came into Fleet Street in 1973, I was privileged because it was the end of the old-fashioned newspaper system. And so I used to work with other journalists, and one day they said, go and meet the crime journalist, and he's at the stab. And I said, what do you mean he's at the stab? The stab, the White Hart. And it was called the stab because journalists would go there and they would talk to each other, then they would stab them in the back. So this was a sort of a typical sort of journalistic thing at the time. And one of my new and most fondest memories of the time was that any pub that you went into in Fleet Street didn't have any carpet flooring at all. It had sawdust. It had sawdust on the floors, and that was because the people who came from the ink room, the machines, were covered in ink, and so all the ink would drop onto the floor, and then they would sweep up the sawdust at the end of the day. And that was one of my first memories of Fleet Street. But it was a marvellous time because in those days, no quarter was given. And it was the most competitive jungle that you could ever possibly imagine to be in. And we would do anything. We would do anything at all to outreach our rivals, and did it joyfully, with a big smile on our faces. But each Christmas, there was a tradition. And the tradition was then that we would go around all the newspapers that we'd heard in any way, and we would apologize to them. And we would have a drink, and we'd have a bit of a smile about what we did. And they said, well, don't bother, we would have done the same at the same time. And then 1st of January again, it was back to normal. It was back to cutting them out again. So I think when you're starting to look at what has happened to media, it's transitioned totally. I was in the first stages of when newspapers went green, and then they started going to greenfield sites. And that, in reality, meant that thousands of former print workers lost their jobs because it was a totally different system altogether. And little bit by little bit, everything became electronic related as well. And so it would end up every day where, when I used to work in newspapers in the first place, the noise on the newsroom of all the typewriters clattering away and everybody buzzing and then running with stories and everything was going, it was action-packed. And then suddenly, I moved to this world of silence, and you almost talked in whispers afterwards. So there was a transition. But during that time, and probably one of the most things to sort of think about tonight as well was that most of my career when I worked in Fleet Street, the newspapers were owned by press barons. So nowadays, there's a different type of press baron, which is social media, which really challenges any messaging coming out and puts so many messages out as well that you don't know who to believe anymore. About a year ago, I was asked by a television company that's an AI, artificial intelligence TV company, to start working with them. And I'm thinking, I look at how they work, and there's no idea. They were telling us that behind the scenes, yes, there were journalists. They were telling us behind the scenes, yes, the journalists were checking reports. But what they were really doing was a thing called scraping. Now, scraping is a modern idiom. Scraping means is that they look at other platforms and they steal, literally, all the material and they put it on their site. So when you're coming to messaging and how do you challenge and change what is happening in this world, it's a very, very difficult world to actually do. One of the things that I really always suggest at a time like this, with any type of media situation, don't preach, listen. Listen. Listen to what people are saying and react to that, first of all, because a lot of the time, a lot of organizations will put out the material they wish to put out, they put out the message that they want to put out, but they're not really listening. They're not listening to the people who attend, who are members of those organizations as well. UPF is great because UPF constantly connects with people across the world. They constantly are finding out what are the issues to deal with, and they're constantly putting out nights like this to actually discuss how that can actually happen at the same time. So the value of UPF, I'm a very proud member of UPF, and as I say, they elevated me up. Nobody was more surprised than me when I became a patron. But it was really a situation where nowadays, when you're trying to sort of challenge what is going on, it is very hard. In the past, I've had examples where I've had what I thought were great stories. And then in reality, I would rush back to the newspaper I was working for. I said, I have this great story, and this is what the story is. Here's the proof. I had one story where I'd met a man who, he was, by the stage I'd met him, was down and out. I had to sort of meet him, and I had to go to his house where he lived because I was after a particular assignment. And he welcomed me in, and it was one of those houses where you have to breathe through your mouth. It was tragic to see this man. And I finished the assignment I had to do, and then he said, "Oh, would you like to have a cup of tea?" And yes, of course, because, he'd been so kind to me, he'd been so generous to me to help me. And basically, he was a high-end political journalist. And he'd won the Mark Twain Award twice, which is the highest political journalism award in the world. He'd won it twice for his political journalism. And then he'd written a book to say that Edward VIII should have been hung as a traitor. And he's sort of talking away to me. Every time I tell this story, I still get the chills. And this is 40 years later. And then he goes to this drawer, and he opens this drawer, and he pulls out these brown pieces of paper, and he opens them up on the table, and he said, these are the telegrams from Hitler, and that was his signature, to Edward VIII to say he was going to put him back on the throne when he invaded Britain. And that's the real reason, we think, why Edward VIII abdicated. So I rushed back with this incredible story. And the reality was, I was told the next day, forget the story. The photographs I'd taken of the telegrams had disappeared. Everything had disappeared. Now, in those days, the press barons, so it would be Lord Rothermere for the newspaper that I was working for, Associated Newspapers, it just got cancelled. So how do you overcome things like this? This is what's happening now. And as I say, the reality is that the atmosphere has changed, where now anybody can write anything in reality. They're anonymous, and how do you actually try and change any type of messaging at all? I think part of the answer is to be regularly putting out positive messaging yourself. Whether it be on social media, coming to talk to people like myself, because with Helen Ashard, my colleague, we have our own television show now that goes out across the world. We also work with Fox in America and NBC in America, and we're sort of the two go-to people when any major royal event happens as well. So our royal show is really designed to talk to people like you, not talk, listen. Listen to people like you, and how can we gain attraction for your messages, for what you're trying to achieve as well. And it's our vision of how to sort of make change in the first place. And then when you're doing blogs or whatever you may be doing yourselves as well, it's very important right now to actually think about, don't preach, teach. Teach what the story is. Be concise, be accurate with what you're sort of saying. And in that way, you can create traction with what you're doing. With religions right now, it's a very difficult thing for religions to actually get their message across. The world that we're living in at the moment, especially in Britain, I'm fearful of, I'll be honest. This is not my world in any way, shape or form. This is not my world. I don't want to see disharmony amongst groups. Our objective with the show that we do is to actually create harmony, is to give people a voice, is to give young people a voice. If we don't, then religions and really cultures and communities are going to rise up. there's a growing feeling in Britain that we can see riots coming. There's a lot of unrest in Britain. And how do you overcome that? For me, you overcome it with one word. It's called kindness. It's called kindness. And a little while ago, the BBC did an investigation. They did a research. They did a survey. And it's the largest survey the BBC have ever done in Britain. And they asked 68,000 people, what and when do you expect to receive kindness? That was the question. 73% of people who were asked said they expect an act of kindness every single day. So I think kindness is something that's needed. Compassion. When I'm seeing all these religions, and they're all great religions, when I see all the religions coming together, I mean, if you look at the coronation, I thought one of the most, and I was reporting for Sky on the coronation. When you look at the coronation and the final bit where all the different religions came together, representatives came together to speak to Charles as well. That's my Britain. That's the Britain that I want to see in life, and the values that I want to see in life as well. So it comes back to, how do you stop media bias? You can't. It's really in one way. You can only combat it with processes that will really create traction for people. And that's partly, where we come from as well. So part of our onward service, our bigger service, is to create traction for individuals, for organizations, for charities, for religions. Because it is very important nowadays that everybody gets a fair hearing, everybody gains values from this, and everybody respects everybody else. Because there's so much misinformation going on. At the moment, I'm involved in something I can't even tell you about, but it's all happening with Israel and a Middle Eastern country, and there are huge issues that are sort of going on behind the scenes. So when you're trying to create the right type of messaging, be truthful, be concise, be heartfelt. Because that is what gains traction. That's what teaches people that they want to listen to. But as I say, the biggest thing of the lot is that, for an organization or religion, putting out messaging, putting out questionnaires on what the people want in Britain, I think is very important as well. Because, a lot of the time, when I look at media organizations, I think a lot of the time, yes, there is bias. They don't like it being said because it goes against, the BBC agenda, but there are biases in all sorts of areas. How do you change that at times? You change it through constant messaging yourself about what are your beliefs, what are the beliefs of the religion, what are the beliefs of the organization. Creating regular promotions, whether it be blogs, just writing on social media, is very important, because the more you write, the higher up you come on Google anyway, especially if you're on YouTube. And it's a very good way of actually highlighting the values and moving forward the messages as well. So I think, it is a very hard subject to talk about, because I would like the perfect world. I want the perfect media as well. I know how scurrilous we are. You know, I used to be scurrilous myself. You know, and trying to be able to beat the opposition. Nowadays, my role, Helena's role, the job of our Royally Rich Lifestyle show, the job of UPF as well, is to have events like this to connect with people as well and listen intentionally to what the opinions are, and then value those issues as well at the same time. So I hope I haven't bored you, and that you know, I've tried to give you a little insight into you know, newspapers, media in general. We're good people, I would finally say. We are good people. You know, we've got good hearts. Sometimes we take ourselves a little bit too seriously, but in reality, we really always try to do the right thing. So thank you so much.